Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Cricket Coach. Today we are looking ahead to Gameweek 7 of the Cricket Drafts County Championship fantasy game with some fixtures and players you might want to look at, as well as my own transfers and my team selection for this weekend. It's a massive game week and I'm really excited for it. So let's get stuck straight in. First up, we'll have a look at the fixtures for the weekend. Which teams and maybe some of the players that you should be targeting to transfer in. And I think this week there's one big standout, and it is Essex away to Worcestershire. Essex have one of the best bowling attacks in the division, and now without Sam Cook, who's off England duties, there is a lot of potential for big points against the Worcestershire side, whose batting lineup has been struggling in Division 1 this year. Jake Libby has been their top scorer this season with only 327 runs, of which 180 of them came in his last innings. Therefore, there's some big potential here for some of the Essex bowlers to have an absolute field day. Top of that list for me, I think, is Jamie Porter, who will be leading the line in Cook's absence. You know, he's picked up nearly 300 points last time they played early in the season. I can't really see him not hauling this week. Harmer could also go big if the wickets are conducive to spin, although he's fairly expensive and he bowled 41 overs last game and only picked up one wicket. So I'm a little bit less certain about him. Another Essex seamer in Shane Snater or Kasim Rajitha could also have a good week. So any bowling option from Essex seems like a good pick this week. But Porter would still, I think, be top of my list. Definitely want to be getting him in this week. Doubling up's also an option if you want two Essex bowlers or two Essex options. But my only issue with this is in the long term, are you going to want two bowlers from the same county in your team? It's something to consider. It's something I try and avoid. Just sort of means I think overall there's a lower potential for the overall points there. But it's something to consider if you want to double up on Essex bowlers this week. Moving on, we've got Somerset versus Sussex at Taunton. And I think that's going to be a really entertaining game. Somerset have only reached 300 twice in their last 4 games, and Sussex dominated them last time they faced each other early in the season. So potentially something on offer there for Sussex players. Someone like Jaden Seals, if he's fit and ready to go. If not, taking a punt on Ollie Robertson could be fairly rewarding, or someone like Jack Carson if the pitch looks more spinner friendly. I think Somerset have Matt Henry, and actually Somerset have quite a good bowling lineup anyway. So I wouldn't take any risks on the Sussex batsmen necessarily, unless you already have them. But I think the bowlers could be a really interesting move. Just in general, there's no more blank game weeks. So every team will play every week from now on, which is first of all very exciting, but also means you can sort of shape your team purely based on the players you want, knowing that they'll play every week rather than having to move players around just to get a full 11. So I think that's really quite good. Okay. So, some of the international player news for this week, quickly. Marnus and Matt Henry are going to be playing for Glamorgan and Somerset, respectively. Both very intriguing options who have done very well in the county championship before and could be really fantastic pickups. Between the two of them, I think I have more faith in Matt Henry. I think he's a fantastic bowler who's been dominating international cricket for the last couple of years. And I can see him doing a sort of Fergus O'Neill type role and just sweeping up wickets in his Somerset stint. He's fairly expensive, but I also think there are a lot of cheap budget players who are doing really well at the moment. So that sort of frees up some of the funds to splash out on more big options such as Henry. I'm almost certainly considering him in my team this week, and I'll get to that a little bit later on. As for Marnus, I know he's done pretty well before, but he's almost had an opposite last few years to Henry in that now he's only a couple of games really away from being out of the Australia side. So he's a good differential option. If you wanted to bring him in this week, I wouldn't say no, but his form's a little ropey and I'm not sure I really back him. But also I wouldn't say that he's a terrible transfer in because we all know what he can do. We all know what he could bring and he could go big. So not a terrible option, but I would be a little bit more wary and I think I'd rather go for someone like Matt Henry for the price as well. Next up is a quick follow-up on yesterday's video about some of the players I was considering. So Abbott, he's playing at Edgbaston this week, which was a very batter-friendly pitch last week. Warwickshire scored over 600 and Surrey put on 500. Means that maybe Abbott this week is not fantastic and maybe just waiting a week to bring him in at the right time is going to be better. I think he's a really good option, but it's going to be pretty hard to pick up wickets at Edgbaston. So maybe just waiting a week or two to bring him into your side, getting that timing right is important too. So shout out to Carl Seed for that one on X. Thank you very much. The other one there is Ben Kellaway. Glamorgan have Mason Crane coming back for them soon, which could affect the game involvement of Ben Kellaway. Now, I'm not sure how much or when this could be, but it's something to consider if you were thinking about bringing him in this week. Maybe his effectiveness will sort of go down over the next couple of weeks. Something to consider. I still think he's a good option. For his price point, he's a fantastic option. But it's maybe just something to consider. And shout out to Cricket Draft Insight for that one as well. So thank you very much. So with all of that, what moves am I making this week? What moves am I looking to make? And for me, it's really only one. I've got Henry Nichols leaving my team and Henry or Bass coming in. So Nichols, I've got Bracey coming back off the bench. So I actually have to bench one of my big batters this week. And I think Nichols is the one that's going to miss out. I brought him in as a bit of a differential. I thought he would do really well for Worcestershire. He has done fairly well. He's just not quite started. He's not quite kicked on from his starts. He started quite well, but he's also playing in a side which puts a lot of pressure on him, I think. As I mentioned earlier, that Worcestershire side are struggling. They're not doing that too well. And so I think that puts a lot of pressure on him. And I think it just means he's unable to score really big points. So I think Nichols is going to be the one that misses out this week. And therefore, I have an opportunity to move him on to a bowler that can sort of help that bowling lineup. So Henry or Bass. Matt Henry has done very well at county before and is one of the best bowlers in the world over the last couple of years, really. He was injured at the start of the season, but he'll almost certainly play for Somerset this weekend. The only reason I hesitate for him is that maybe it's worth a week to get him into his stride after coming back from injury. Will he hit the ground running and pick up wickets from week one, or will returning from injury have an effect and maybe getting used to some of the English conditions? Maybe that won't quite work in his favour. But then again, at 2.5% owned in the game, he could be an amazing differential pick, which can really help me go back up the rankings. So I think Matt Henry is a really, really good option. I'm someone definitely considering this for this week. The other way I could go is Mohamed Abbas, who started the season very well as well for Notts. Because he's 0.5 million cheaper, it would then allow my other transfer, as you can see here, Richards, to move sideways. Instead of to a super, super cheap option, I can move sideways to like a Noah Thane, who has Worcestershire this week. The Essex All Rounder has Worcestershire. And, rather than trying to find that 4.2 million option to sit on my bench, I could play Thane this week. And maybe he does really well against Worcestershire. But then the question is again, does Thane, if I bring Thane in, does he even play? My all-rounder slots look really good. Is it worth benching one of Barnard, Holland, Dawson or Proctor for Thane, who's not as good a player, both in real life and fantasy? And yes, he has a really good fixture this week, but which one of those four do I bench for him? I'm not sure if that's really the way to go. Now, I'm not sure that's smart or targeting to fixture could pay off there, or maybe I'm over-analysing that a little bit. There are also some other options, cheap players being like sort of Charlie Allison instead, so the Essex opener. But then who do I bench again is an extra Essex bat really the way to go this week? I think it's tough to say. Between these two, I either go for that sort of Henry move and get a super cheap option, or I go for a Bass and get a slightly better secondary option. I think it's tough to see which way I'll go. I think the Henry move seems a little bit more natural with a bit more of a stable upside. So that's probably the way I'll go. And hopefully it pays off. I just don't want to see a Bass getting a fifer while Henry gets injured in his second over. That would be disastrous. And so the other transfer there is Richards just to a cheap player. This is sort of the accompanying transfer. I don't want Richards in my team anymore. And with the spare transfer, it seems smart to try and bolster the bench now. So there's, because there are no more blank game weeks. So not sure who it'll be. It depends on the cheap options and who's actually playing. If I did go for Henry and I had to go for that sort of 4.2 million player, it could well be the likes of Kai Smith, Zen Malik, Asa Tribe, or someone in that price range who's playing someone nice and cheap. So with those transfers, here is my Game Week 7 team selection. Batting, I've got Bracey, Yates, and Harris. Pretty happy with this one. Harris is in fantastic form, and not much more needs to be said about him. Yates is one of my favourite fantasy cricketers at the moment, and the amount he bowls for a batter is criminal. I'm super happy to have him in my team at the moment, and he's doing really, really well. So he will stay. Bracey comes back off the bench after his blank game week. Hopefully, he can keep that form going from before his week off. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully he can keep ticking over. I have Simpson as well as the wicketkeeper. Despite not scoring many last week, I think he's a really good option that won't keep getting low scores for long. And then there's just a note here that sort of I put Simpson over Bracey in the wicket-keeping position, as I think despite Sussex and Gloucestershire having a fairly equal chance of picking 20 wickets up against Somerset and Kent respectively, I think Simpson's picked up a lot of points in the wicket-keeping position, because obviously you only get points for wicket-keeping catches and dismissals for the player you have in your wicket-keeping position. So I have to pick one of them, and I think Simpson is going to be the one for me. I don't really feel the need to move him on from that wicket-keeping position. So overall, I'm really happy with the batters. Hopefully some big runs from them this week, and we'll see how that goes. Moving on to the all-rounders, I've got Holland, Barnard, Proctor and Dawson, and I'm really, really happy with this lineup. I think this is exactly what I want all my all-rounders to be looking like at the moment. These are the four I think I would ideally have in my team. They're all fairly similar in that they have really high game involvement, batting within the top six and bowling a large sum of overs. This means that they're just more likely to pick up more points in the long run. I think Barnard in particular is in great form, and he's the top scorer in the game at the moment. So that's why I've currently got my captain's armband on him. As I'll get to later as well, Dawson week by week is becoming more and more viable and more valuable. So he's looking really good. Holland and Proctor both open the batting or bat really high up and open the bowling or bowl first change. Either way, they're almost always involved with the game. And so I'm really, really happy with them. My all-rounders look good for this week. And I think they're going to pick up a lot of points. And that's sort of the engine room of my team, really. There's so much game involvement. I can switch on to any of the cricket at any point, and one of these players is almost certainly going to be involved. And that's really exciting for me. So moving on to the bowlers. Bowling, I'm very excited to see how my bowling goes this week. I've got Port away to Worcestershire, which is a pretty mouth-watering prospect, as I discussed earlier. Early in the season, he picked up nearly 300 points. And without Sam Cook, I don't see why he won't do that again. In fact, I think he's such a good option. I'm almost considering giving him the captaincy this week, which, I'll get to later. But I've got Matt Henry as well, as I discussed earlier, my main transfer in this week. I spoke about him a lot. But the one problem he does bring up is whether to bench Ahmed or Galvin. I think it's difficult. I think they're fairly similar. I think in this team I've put up here, I've benched Ahmed. I think Galvin's in really good form, and I don't really want to bench him at the moment. I think Ahmed's a super good player too, and I think he could pick up points in any week. And he's super cheap as well. But I think Galvin has he's been smashing it when he's been playing. And he's a bit more of an all-rounder than Ahmed. So I think I'm going to play Galvin and bench Ahmed this week. But that's a pretty tight one. That could have gone either way. It's pretty tough to say. Moving on to the bench. Now, with no more game weeks, I'll actually have some decent bench covering options, which is pretty nice. I've got Brooks sitting at first, with Ahmed dropping out for Matt Henry this week. So him sitting at second. I think the Durham batting lineup looks pretty good as well. Just another thought on Ahmed. Durham batting lineup looks pretty good. So I think I'll put him in second bench. For the sake of this as well, I've got Rafi Weatherall in as my cheap option for Richards. But that could be, obviously, as I discussed, any 4.2, 4.3 playing option. Or I could also just put in a 4.0 sort of dead rubber player who I won't need and who can just sit on my bench the rest of the season and free up funds for other players. He won't play, but I won't necessarily need him, and he can help me get some of those bigger players. So that could also be a move I do last minute. I think over the next couple of weeks, I want to tweak this bench slightly so there are some cheaper players on it so I can invest that money into the starting 11. But those are more luxury transfers if I don't have fire to put out elsewhere. I'd rather not have these sort of 5 million players on the bench. I'd rather have 4.5, sub 4.5 players who play but can just sit on my bench, and so I can invest more money into my first 11. So that's what my full 15 and my selected 11 is going to look like for game week 7. And that leaves the only final thing to talk about is captaincy for this week. Normally, I'd go for an all-rounder but Porter or Henry looks pretty good this week. If I was going to go for a bowler, Porter against Worcestershire, I don't think it gets much better than that. He looks really, really good. He's almost guaranteed to get a small haul. But then there's also a thought that maybe I'm being too knee-jerky, too reactionary. After 2 red arrows, am I going to tear out the playbook? I've gone down in the overall rank in the last 2 weeks, down to just under 100, which is not ideal. And maybe it's too early in the season to start tearing up this playbook and not captain an all-rounder, which is what I normally do. All-rounders are really good captains for a reason, and that's why I almost always go for them. And so I don't know. It's difficult to say whether I go for Porter and take advantage of that. I don't know. Barnard's in really good form too. So him or Holland would probably be the one I'd go for. Maybe double captain this week. Again, I was discussing this last week. Maybe double captain's the way to go. Or is that, is that asking too much from Barnard to go big again twice in a row? Holland on a seamer at Lords could be really good too. Opening that bowling against Middlesex at Lords, I could see him picking up a good few wickets, so he could be a good captaincy option. Dawson, maybe there's a little bit in it for the spinner as well this week. It's been really dry this week, so maybe Dawson on that dry, cracked surface could be pretty good too. I don't know. It's difficult to say. And just like last week, tough decisions. I don't know if there seems like enough to activate the double captain as of yet. I'm not sure there's two really standout candidates. It could be any one of Barnard, Holland, Dawson, Porter, and even Henry. I mean, Proctor's a good pick too. So I don't think it's quite enough, as there's not quite two standout. Even if I did activate the double captain, I'm not sure which two out of those people I would even use it on. So I think Barnard, who I have it on at the moment, as you can see, is sort of the safe pick. But the double of like Porter or Dawson could have massive upside if that pays off. I think I'm more likely to go with the former and just go for Barnard and play it safe this week, but that could easily swing before the deadline tomorrow. Tough decision. It's pretty close. I'll be interested to see what other people do and in what direction other people go. Anyways, that is all for today. So thank you very much for watching. Good luck ahead of this weekend. Smash it. I hope your team does really well, and I will catch you next week. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.